Welcome to Madang podcast. Today I'm so excited to have Dr. Christena Cleveland, who is a social psychologist, public theologian, author, and activist. Today she shares her new book, God is a Black Woman. In this episode, she shares about white male God, Father Sky God, Black woman's beauty, imagination is theology, Black Madonnas, her pilgrimage in France, and so much more. Please stay tuned. Please join over 3,000 people on Homebrewed Christianity's Jesus Deconstructed. Rediscover the freaking awesome Jesus this Lent. This is an online pop-up learning community with Dr. Diana Butler-Bass and Dr. Tripp Fuller. Make sure you read their books too. Follow Homebrewed Christianity as Dr. Fuller has other amazing weekly podcasts. Join him as he celebrates 14 amazing years of podcasting and has become the most listened to theological podcast in the world. The Rainbow Push Coalition is an international human and civil rights organization founded by Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr. Rainbow Push Coalition seeks to empower people through the effective use of grassroots advocacy, issue orientation, and connections between the greater community and the disenfranchised. Please join Rainbow Push and please donate. And please join the 7th annual Push Tech, which is happening on May 18 to 19, 2022. Please go to www.rainbowpush.org and please join today. While every statistic available today shows the church in the West is in multi-generational decline, the opposite is true almost everywhere else. The churches of non-Western cultures have seen extraordinary and sustained growth for decades, places like Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Insights from churches from these cultures can help renew the worldwide church. They have the power to invest Western and global mission, worship, and discipleship with new vibrancy. Learn more at theglobalchurchproject.com.
Show your support and please order Invisible, available wherever books are sold. For sponsorship inquiries, please email madangpodcast.gmail.com. This is Madang, an outdoor living room for guests to share their experiences and their work. I invite you to come in and stay for a while.
Welcome to Madang. Today's very special guest is Dr. Christena Cleveland. She's a social psychologist, public theologian, author, and activist. She is the founder and director of the Center for Justice and Renewal, as well as its sister organization, Sacred Folk, which creates resources to stimulate people's spiritual imaginations and support their journeys toward liberation. An award-winning researcher and former professor at Duke University's Divinity School, she now lives in Boston, Massachusetts. She is with me today to discuss her newest book, God is a Black Woman, published by Harper One. So Christena, it's such an honor to have you on my little podcast, Madang. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes, and it's so good to be connected with you again. I remember the last time I saw you in person might have been when you were at my house in North Carolina.
Yeah, it was a beautiful house. And I remember it kind of overlooked like this beautiful forest. And I just kind of said, yeah, I said, it's beautiful. But I said, Christena, I think I'd be scared living here.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I think I remember that conversation because it was right in the middle of the woods.
Yeah, but it was beautiful. And I enjoy working with you at Duke just for that little period that I was working with you. And I just admire everything that you do. So I just first want to say thank you so much for writing this like life-changing book. So thank you so much for writing it.
Thank you. It means a lot to me to hear you say that because your work has really inspired my work. So I just, oh my gosh, well, the way you integrate history, the way you integrate gender, the way you work with theology. I mean, it's very womanist.
Thank you so much, because
it's
yeah,
been wonderful to watch other people do this work and then to take a stab at it myself. So
yeah. No, I just love your newest book, God is a Black Woman. And as I was reading it, it's like, I wish I wrote the book, because it's just so, like, you write so well. You made me laugh. You made me cry. You made me, there were like so many things in that one book. It was like a huge journey for me. So can you just let me know, like, because you share a lot of your life too. And I was like, wow, you had a lot of courage to share so many stories. And like right from the beginning, I was laughing because you share that story of your pilgrimage where you want to touch the Black Madonna. So for our listeners, can you just share how you started writing the book and how you began this pilgrimage? Because it's just so exciting.
Yeah. And I mean, you're one of the people who's had a bit of a front row seat to some of this, because we were friends before I went on this journey. But yeah, you know, I was a professor at Duke at the time, and I had been a columnist for Christianity Today. And I'd been writing a lot about race and the problem of white Jesus. And really, it was 2016 when Trump got elected that I discovered, okay, the problem isn't just white Jesus, the problem is male Jesus too. And that's when I really started taking a more intersectional lens and looking at the problem of a white male God in America, because I saw that it's people of color, but then also women who just get separated from the divine because of the way that we understand divinity in the United States. And then look who gets to be president, someone who is racist and misogynistic, you know? And so that really is the journey. That was a huge jump start to my journey towards God as a Black woman. And I was like, I have to start. I mean, I grew up in the Protestant church, conservative Protestant church. And so I had no images of a divine that was Black and female. You know, I've read James Cone, of course, and others, but to actually seek out that was so important for me. And I found the Black Madonna really quickly and I fell in love. I mean, right away, I fell in love. I saw pictures of her and I remember my entire biology changing. An exhale. Wow. I had been holding my breath in my whole life, maybe, as I was in trepidation around this white male God and the institutions that support him, like Duke Divinity School, you know, which has its pluses, but is also just a really white patriarchal place. And so getting to finally encounter on the books, you know, this sacred image of a Black woman, and to get connected to the stories of people who for thousands of years have venerated her, and people of all colors and people of all religions. I mean, there's a Black Madonna in Senegal, of all places, that has Hindu, Muslim, and Christian pilgrims that go to her, you know, and it's like, she's for everyone, you know? Wow. And so then that sent me on the journey to France. So a couple years later, I was like, you know what? I still work at Duke. I still have professional development funds. I'm gonna let Duke pay for me to go visit these Black Madonnas. So that's what I did. So the journey kind of started in 2016, but the physical journey of going to the Black Madonnas was in late 2018. And I walked, 400 miles to visit 18 different Black Madonnas. I think I talk about 8 or 9 in the book. So there are more stories to be told, you know, but each one transformed me. And so like, it's really encouraging for me to hear that the book felt like a journey for you too, because that was my goal, you know, is to share my journey with other people. And it really was a journey of adventure and intrigue and, you know, police chase, and also beauty and laughter and connecting with nature. And meeting really quirky people.
It was a total journey, and that's a gift, because you know, I write books, but I can't write the way you did this. It was so beautifully written, and you know, enough details for us to kind of jump into the pages and be with you. I actually felt like I was like in that coffee shop watching you hide.
Well, that's such a wonderful gift. Oh my gosh.
It was so incredible. And that just drew me in. And I think you just share that, you know, with your other life experiences. And the other parts that I actually, you know, wow, you know, you had a lot of courage to share some of your upbringing and your conservative church. And that is very similar in so many ways of my own journey. So I thought, you know, this is wonderful that you had this, and then, but you had enough courage to share it with the whole world, because you really opened up a lot about your conservative background, and then how you've moved on. So
yeah, and it's so, yeah, I share lots of stories about my relationship with my parents, including corporal punishment, and some pretty severe abuse that took place under the name of, them doing their best job to try to connect me with God, but it's a white male God, even though, and I think what's powerful about that story, there are a few things that are powerful. One, I show that I learned how to heal myself, which I think is so empowering for all of us, doesn't matter where we come from, we can heal ourselves. But also it's powerful because, my family's Black, and a lot of the Black church spaces I grew up in propped up this white male God. Even if they weren't explicitly doing that, they were implicitly doing that. And so just showing that, like, we all can be white male God, not just white men. Any of us can. And I write a chapter about white women being white male God too, and so it's like this, and I think that's what's so helpful, is especially because with my social psychology background, I really want people to see these are non-conscious processes. Very few people are showing up in the world like Putin or something trying to be evil, you know what I mean? Or like Trump, but there's a lot of evil in this world because of these larger systems and the ways that we've been conditioned.
Yeah. And I think, you also brought in theological imagination, and then you use Father Sky God. And I thought that term was really good, because for me, in the Korean churches, we also had this white Father God all the time. My mother had that famous, like, cheap print of Jesus, the white Jesus behind the couch that my dad found in a dumpster somewhere. Like, we grew up poor, but we worship this white Father God. And the Korean languages, when we pray, we say Father God a lot in Korean.
I was in a Christian a cappella group at Dartmouth, so I know a lot of Korean Christians, and I've prayed with a lot of Korean Christians.
And we say Father God
every other line. Yes. Father God, we pray. Father God, we love you. Father God, totally. I know exactly what you're talking about.
So when you wrote it, I thought, oh my gosh, that's just like how I grew up. So I really liked it when you wrote Father Sky God. I thought that was like a perfect thing that we, people of color, women of color, have been so conditioned to worship and talk about, and it's been so detrimental. And when you share your life, you are showing all these experiences of how it has been so negative. And, it just messed up your life. It messed up my life in so many ways. So that's why it was such a wonderful journey. In your book, you wrote there's 450 Black Madonnas. Right? That is quite amazing. Are you going to go and like, which one is your favorite? Like, that's amazing, because I knew there were a lot, but I didn't know there were that many.
Yeah, and they're on most continents. So they're on the continent of Africa. They're in South America, Latin America. They're in North America. Most of them are in Europe, but there are lots in Asia too. There's several in the Philippines. There's a really famous one in Japan. So they are all over the place. And the 450 is probably a conservative number, because those are just the official ones that are called Madonnas. And those are the ones that are associated with, like, documented miracles. So there are Black virgins in lots of churches all over the place, but those aren't the ones that are like pilgrimage sites. And like, so yeah, I mean, there are 400 kind of like official famous ones. And then, so many more that are just in people's churches. I think I've visited probably about 50 so far of them.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I don't know if I'll see all of them, but
you're young. You can still see
maybe. Yeah. But I'm also kind of like you in the sense that, like, I have these like really powerful theological moments, but I'm always moving too. You know what I mean? And so and like, my book launch got delayed because of pandemic and just, just like life. Right. And so I was telling my literary agent, we better hurry up and get this book out, because next year God might be a dragon to me. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, I'm just constantly theological exploration, theological imagination is what we do. Right. And so So it's like, yeah, of course I love the Black Madonna. And there's a part of me that's also like, what's next too? You know, which I know you understand. You understand that. Yeah.
I totally understand you.
Yeah. But I'm not sure that I have a favorite because it's just it's like, who's your favorite kid? You know what I mean?
No, everyone has a favorite kid. Not just kidding. Every parent that says they don't, they're all lying.
Yeah, they're just trying to be diplomatic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would say the one that I keep returning to, because it seems like her particular water is what I need, is the one that I call She Who Cherishes Our Hot Mess. Our Lady of the Sick in Vichy, France. At least amongst the ones in the book. She's the one that I keep returning to, because she's the one who really helps me to see that my need, my imperfection is actually my offering to her. Like that's what she wants. That's what she wants me to bring to her. And, you know, I'm a perfectionist and I'm used to excelling at things. And I'm used to being, you know, in these academic spaces where disconnecting from your body is the best way to get ahead, you know? And so I have found, even with the book launch and everything, and just the ups and downs of having a book out where, you know, I'm sure you relate to this, where it's like, oh, I want more people to be reading the book, you know, like the publicity campaign's not going as well as I'd hoped, you know, just all the messiness. And to be able to bring that to her, because she cherishes our hot mess, that's pretty powerful. But, you know, all of them are like amazing. I also really love Our Lady of the Side Eye, and just how much she hates white patriarchy and how much she stands against it and how much she's unapologetically Black and for women. And so, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing it. So would you recommend others in search of the Black Madonna to go on a pilgrimage like yourself?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. I mean, I think there's something, I think one of the reasons why I'm glad I'm out of academia is because I feel like academia has made it seem like theology is in the head. And I think a pilgrimage, whether you're walking or driving or whether it's just down the street, right? You don't have to go all the way to France. But I think an embodied search for the divine is theology. And the interactions that we have and the stories that we hear and the emotions that we feel, that's just as legitimate as a book published by Oxford Press, you know? And so I want people to go on whatever their pilgrimage looks like. And it could be down the street to 7-Eleven. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be all the way to France. But I think for me, it was so powerful to come face to face with images of sacred Black femininity and to realize I have been starved of that. And this is like healing water. But, you know, next week I have tickets to go to a Black art exhibit at a museum, and that's a pilgrimage too.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that people will actually first read your book and then they can go to the pilgrimage. Your book is doing so well. I don't know what you're worried about, but it is doing super well. I'm so glad. And I know when I was sharing that you're going to be on my podcast, people said, oh, I have to go buy your book. So I know even just like that, people are already going to buy your book. So one of the things that really caught me, one of the sentences that you wrote is, imagination is theology. We can only believe what we can imagine. And our cultural landscape hasn't given us many tools to imagine a non-white, non-male God. That spoke so deeply to me as a theologian, because, you know, students come and they don't know how to do theology, but people have used imagination with theology, but the way you worded this is so powerful to me. Imagination is theology, because many people would say theological imagination. So I just thought that was so interesting. I don't know if you want to say more about this, because I think that is just how you brought this whole book into life.
Yeah, well, you know, it's like, I feel like there's a playfulness to the divine and a creativity to the divine that we are so disconnected from, particularly in these like kind of white patriarchal spaces. And so, you know, yes, theology is a creed for sure. But if you go back to even the history behind creeds, imagination had to infuse some of that, right? Like even the idea of the Trinity, there's literally no like physical evidence of the Trinity.
Yeah. But
And
many
yet
people will say
somehow-
there is.
many people will say there is, but like we know as scholars, there isn't any physical evidence, and there's no place in
No
scripture.
scriptural.
There's no scriptural, right? But it's a very powerful theological idea that especially when I read womanist ideas about theology, about the Trinity, I just think of like women circling me, you know, like 3 women just circling me. And so, you know, I feel like I really wanted to show that there's something sacred about our imaginations. So we get to participate in the construction of theology, and that's everyone, not just people who've gone to divinity school, but then also our theology helps us to imagine, to actually be with God, you know? And I was amazed at literally just looking at the images of the Black Madonna on paper in a book and realizing, oh, I'm sacred too. I mean, I've read all the scriptures. For God so loved the world, you know, like you are beautifully and wonderfully made. I've read all those words, but it was it was seeing the image and my imagination blossoming that I was able to finally embody those truths. Oh, I am beautifully and wonderfully made because I can see it. I can imagine it now. I can actually, and so it's like, gosh, our construction of who God is, if it's not imaginative, we're never going to be able to connect with this infinite God, you know?
Yeah, Christina, that's so powerful because you bring in bodily experiences in the book. And one of them that I kind of related just a part was when, you know, the whole chapter on starving yourself, you know, and you do in other chapters talk about, you know, Black women's bodies. I think these are so important to talk about because we don't appreciate, you know, I wrote a short piece, the white Western domination of beauty, you know, the white woman's domination of beauty. So people like you and me, I wrote it many years ago, so it's probably not that great anymore, but it is, you know, we don't appreciate our bodies, but then you grew up fasting and then, but you use the word starving because you were, when I was reading it, I thought, oh my gosh, you were literally starving. For me, you know, that because I was in such a conservative evangelical upbringing, you know, fasting was important. My mother made me fast on Good Friday when I was a kid and I could not bear it. Like at 4 o'clock, I went to the store and bought some candy. And then I felt so guilty about that my whole life. I still have a piece of guilt of that. You know, why couldn't I wait about another 8 hours? I couldn't wait. I just went. So your stories of, you know, starving yourself were so powerful. So say a bit more about this body, because you were already talking about it and I just kind of interrupted you.
Absolutely.
So say more about.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. You know, and that's in a chapter on white male God's war on our bodies. And I really, it was really fun to do some of the research because, you know, kind of leading with my imagination, I then wanted to go and see, like, have people done work on literally like beauty and morality, beauty and goodness. Because I was like, I feel like what happened in my situation was if you didn't look a certain way, not only were you ugly or unattractive, you were also unholy. Like there was a moral statement about your lack of beauty, whether that's because you were too fat or whatever. And so it was really interesting to go and read some of sociologist Sabrina Strings' work that really makes this connection across history between anti-Blackness and the unholiness of Blackness and fat phobia. And showing, you know, and then tying it in with some other social science research that really shows that, you know, we are all in this scary rat race trying to meet some unattainable standard. And the standard is shaming us. And it's not just like, oh, I'm ugly. It's I'm bad. Like I'm a bad person. And so, yeah, I got those messages really early on in the church and ended up having a full-blown, you know, eating disorder. And that was something that I needed to bring to the Black Madonna, because finally I had an image of God that I trusted with this really hard thing, you know, and you know what it's like when you're in the professional world as a woman, like you get really good at just being excellent, you know, like you just figure things out. But this was one thing I couldn't figure out. Like, why do I hate my body? And why is my relationship to food and exercise so toxic? I tried all the diets. I tried all the self-control. I couldn't fix it. And so I think that was it kind of brought me to my knees in a way to be like, okay, I actually need to imagine a God who's going to be here for me, because the God that I have been taught, I don't trust with this. He's actually responsible for this.
Yeah. And you say that over and over again, how the white male God is responsible for all these things. And I thought that was so powerful. You repeated it in different places. And I thought that was really good. And you also, because I know some people, you know, who may pick up your book just out of curiosity or will read it just to fight back on this. Yeah, this God is a Black woman. But the line that I and you and everyone else who will defend you will be, you wrote on page 39, so white people invented the white Christ. I think that needs to be told over and over again. Mary Daly, she wrote that she has a fabulous quote: if God is male, then the male is God. She didn't reference the whiteness, but you know, that is inferred anyway. So I think to say to people, white people invented the white Christ, the people need to hear it over and over again. Did you want to expand on that? Because it's such an important part of your book.
Yeah, and that's a great example of how imagination is theology, right? Like white Christ is literally a figment of the white imagination.
Yes,
literally
white male heterosexual.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, cisgender, all the things, right? And you know, to actually learn that the earliest actual image that we have of Christ is of a Black man surrounded by Black and brown people, to learn that for the first 400 years of Christianity, all known images of Christ or Mary are Black and brown. I mean, like, it's just this unbelievable figment of a toxic figment of imagination, you know? And so I talk about in the book just how really the white Christ was a tool during the transatlantic slave trade. You know, these were white people who were doing horrible things to Black people, and they needed a God who could affirm that, a God who okayed these atrocities. And so they invented the white Christ. And you know, I love, you know, my old colleague at Duke, J. Cameron Carter's work, because he really talks about the anti-Semitism at heart too, you know, at play. And separating Jesus from his Jewish Palestinian identity, you know. But there was also this, you know, it was a very powerful tool in the transatlantic slave trade, to justify the subjugation of Black people. Well, Christ is white, therefore Christ is not Black, therefore we don't have to treat Black people with dignity and respect, because they're not really human, because the humans are the ones who are most like Christ. And of course,
and it was used, add what?
Add male to that, of course.
And it was used during segregation. You know, it was used in so many different ways, and ways that white, you know, Europeans colonized other places around the world. So it wasn't just
discovery,
the enslavement, but the so it's been evil in so many ways. I think people really need to understand the history of it to know where they're coming from, so that they don't get all mad at people like you and I who are trying to say it was an invention. So going on from there, you also say, for if God is a Black woman, then she's a Black trans woman, obviously. So why don't you obviously. So can you expand on that? Because that's I think that because that's such an important issue today with, you know, it's popping up everywhere, and people, you know, there's, I don't know, this new law with gay something, I don't know, I just saw. But anyway, can you expand on it? Because I think it'd be so helpful for so many listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way I think about white male God is that he's this white male, cisgender, able-bodied, American, English-speaking, middle class or higher, formally educated Christian man, right? And if the more you approximate that and the power and the toxic masculinity that is embodied in that, the more you are seen as sacred and holy. And so Black women are pretty much at the opposite end of that spectrum. Although there are Black women like me or Korean women like you who would be like, yeah, I can't check white and I can't check male, but I'm cis, or I'm formally educated and upwardly mobile, and I speak English, and I'm in these places of power. And so I need to acknowledge that, right? That on the one hand, I'm subjugated by this spectrum of power and seen as generally unholy as a Black woman. But on the other hand, I'm seen as more holy than some other Black women, like Black women who are also socioeconomically oppressed and are called welfare queens. I've never been called a welfare queen. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I've never been seen as a 100% blight on society, because I've always done well at proving to the white people that I'm a good member of society, and I'll keep my job and I'll stay there even if they treat me terrible, right? And I have the degrees and I'll do the things that you want me to do in order to try to get as close to that white male at the top.
Yeah, and you share that about your time at Dartmouth too. So
totally.
I think listeners need to read that chapter, because you say it so beautifully there of trying to be part of that. Okay, continue,
trying to be part of that system. Yeah. And just the fact, I think I call myself white male God in blackface at that point, and just saying like I embodied all that white male God was as a Black woman. But then I think, the part of the expansion of these 450 Black Madonnas that are all different colors. And they're all Black, but all different skin colors. Yeah. Some are gender non-conforming. Some are gender conforming. Some are pregnant. Some have their breast exposed and are breastfeeding. Some are thin. Some are not as thin. And just realizing that we can all find ourselves in her body. And that it's important for me as a cis Black woman who is upwardly mobile to recognize that I am not the complete opposite of white male God. Black trans women are. And so if God is a Black woman, and the idea of God as a Black woman is about making right the social system, then we need to ascribe and affirm sacredness and divinity to Black trans women who are extremely at the opposite of white male God. And so this whole journey has expanded my own theology of gender too. And it's been really powerful.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think that will be powerful for so many of us, who know people who are struggling with their identity in so many different ways. So I think that's why your book is so powerful on so many levels. Another interesting thing, you were talking about yoga, because that was part of the weight, thing. And then how your mother got all nervous because then you will not become like a Christian. My mother did that all the time. If I did you do dancing or something that's dancing with the devil or something. Totally. I had all these parallel experiences, and I'm like, oh my goodness, Christena. So you also, so you share that and how your parents kind of made you afraid of you're gonna, not become a Christian in their kind of sense. And then you shared your Christianity Today, that article. I remember when that article came out, but I did not know I think you said you wrote that you had 2 death threats.
Oh, I had a few. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, wow. So was that a very, that article when it came out, was that a pivotal time for you to kind of leave evangelicalism, or have you already left?
Yeah, that was, that was 2015. I was still, I was still speaking in some of those conferences because I had booked so far out in advance. But there were several things that happened in 2015 around, the response to Black Lives Matter, so the awakening, I think, became the awakening with me in the evangelical church really began in 2012, 10 years ago, with the response to Trayvon Martin. And that's when because that was the first time in my adult life where there's like an actual national conversation happening about Blackness and race. And I was seeing all these friends and colleagues who claim to be my family, and we're all part of the family of God and everything. And they just like were completely falling apart with any conversation about race, and just unwilling, almost like, just the same pushback you get for white Christ. It's like, well, obviously, I mean, he's a Black kid and he's dead. Obviously he deserved it. You know what I mean? Like just that kind of stuff. So that was kind of the beginning of the awakening. But I think by 2015, I had written a book for the evangelical church, spoken in all the places, and had seen firsthand the hypocrisy and the fact that like, these people don't actually care. They just need a Black History Month speaker, or they need somebody to make them feel good about themselves this one year, or they're dealing with a public relations crisis because someone hung a noose on their campus or something like that. You know what I mean? But like, so I was a little bit more jaded by the time the 2015 article came out. It was okay. So when I got all those death threats, I was like, yeah, I'm out. Like, this is ridiculous, because it was like such a gentle article.
Yeah, I thought it was a great article. I thought it was fantastic.
Like, and that I think that's just what showed me how much the white Christian world in general is disgusted by Blackness, and literally could not handle the possibility of Blackness being sacred. You know what I mean? Like, it was almost like this like puke reaction. It was so like. And that to me, I was just like, yeah, like these people do not have the theological imagination to see my sacredness. They're incapable.
Is so painful. It was painful for me to hear you right now, but then also in your book, when you're sharing all that, that because we are all created in God's image. And for some people, they can preach about it, but they cannot kind of live that. Live it.
And that's the disconnect, I think, between theology and theological imagination. You know what I mean? Because it's like, they spout these words. Like, we're all loved.
They write about it.
They write about it. I know. I'm like, oh, wow, your book about justice was good. Your life about justice isn't good. But your book about
exactly. But this, the embodiment and living it out is a totally different thing. And it's a much harder thing. Just like, sometimes I preach, it's much easier to preach on something than to actually live it, after you preach. Yeah, totally.
Well, there were several times. I mean, part of the reason why this book took a few years to get out is because there were several times where I was writing and I just realized I can't write this with integrity. There's work I need to do.
And you write that in the book too. Yeah, you wrote that in the book in certain places.
Yeah. Like I'm writing about how, the sacred Black feminine transforms my need to control everything. But here I am over here trying to control things with my sister or something like that. You know what I mean? And so stepping away from chapters for months at a time and saying, you know what, like I have work. She wants me to be more free. This is an invitation to be more free. It's not about perfection. I know I'm never going to live a life of 100% integrity, but it's like, I could hear the inner wisdom within me saying, this is a chance to be more free, Christena. And you've been hurt by the people who've written things that are wildly different than their lives. Of course, we want to give people space to be human. I'm not expecting anyone to be perfect, but I mean, I've been colleagues with people who are famous on their work on justice, and every single Black person in the building hates them. You know what I mean? And so it's like, okay, clearly there's a disconnect because the Black people hate you. It's not just like the Black people don't care about you. Like the Black people hate you, Yeah, you're speaking at the justice conference. You know what I mean? Like, okay, there's something going on here, right? And so that's why I think a big part of God as a Black woman is about bringing these things together, bringing the mess to her.
Yeah.
It's okay.
And you do it so beautifully.
Say, it's okay to say, I'm struggling with this. And I'm also writing about this principle, and there's a disconnect. Help me.
And you did it very nice.
Oh,
you did it so beautifully and so nicely. It's just a great book. I'm like I said at the beginning, I wish it was a book that I wrote, as a Korean woman, not as a Black woman, but I just thought it was so powerful in so many levels, easy to read. It just gets you right from the beginning, and it won't let you go until you come to some peace within you. So it's a very challenging book, and I'm so grateful. So just, I would love to talk with you all day long, and we need to one day get together and do that. But for our listeners, what is your next project? I know you have all these projects going on, and you're always doing something. You're like going 1,000 miles an hour. So what is the next thing that you're working on, or what is your next book that you're doing?
So I am working on 3 different books, but
oh my God.
but they won't all be like, one of them's like a 10-year project, another one's like a 5-year project. And there's another one I'm hoping to get out in the next couple of years. So we'll see.
Okay.
Because life happens too.
Yeah.
So I am working on, the book that's the most urgent is really kind of like a practical spirituality of God as a Black woman. So this, God as a Black woman, people got to see my journey. And a big question that people are coming up with is like, how do I do this? Like, how do I get free in the way that you have? What are the practices? What are the principles that guided your journey? So something more of a manual. Yeah. And then also
that would be a good follow-up to God is a Black woman.
Follow-up. Yeah. A really good follow-up. Yeah. And then also I'm launching next month a virtual Black Madonna pilgrimage. And so we're going to go and like return to all of the Black Madonnas in the book and allow people to have their own transformation and their own journey. So that's a great thing for people that's coming up like in April, starting in April.
Yeah, so that's exciting. So hopefully this podcast will come up before your pilgrimage. So I hope people will join you, those who are listening, that they can join you on the pilgrimage, and we'll go out and buy. I had Trip Fuller. I don't know if you know Trip Fuller. Trip Fuller is like, you don't need to read my book. You can just buy it. So anyway, I'm hoping that people will buy your book.
I would like people to buy it.
Yeah, and read it. Yeah. So
and then,
go
and gift
buy
it, and then gift it.
Yeah, gift it. That's I think it makes a great gift. It's a powerful gift, and I think it's a life-changing book. So thank you so much for going on that pilgrimage and for writing it and taking your time with it, because I think that just made it so strong, so powerful, so empowering, and so enlightening in so many ways. It really moved me and touched me. And I know it won't be just me. I know it has already touched so many people since the book came out. So thank you, Christena, for spending this time with me on Madang, and hope to have you back another time when your second book that follows this one will be out too. So thank you so much for all the work that you do, the justice work, the speaking and the writing. You just inspire me to work even harder. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Grace. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Thank you.
Please join over 3,000 people on Homebrewed Christianity's Jesus Deconstructed. Rediscover the freaking awesome Jesus this Lent. This is an online pop-up learning community with Dr. Diana Butler-Bass and Dr. Trip Fuller. Make sure you read their books too. Follow Homebrewed Christianity, as Dr. Fuller has other amazing weekly podcasts. Join him as he celebrates 14 amazing years of podcasting and has become the most listened to theological podcast in the world. The Rainbow Push Coalition is an international human and civil rights organization founded by Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr. Rainbow Push Coalition seeks to empower people through the effective use of grassroots advocacy, issue orientation, and connections between the greater community and the disenfranchised. Please join Rainbow Push, and please donate. And please join the 7th annual Push Tech, which is happening on May 18 to 19, 2022. Please go to www.rainbowpush.org and please join today. While every statistic available today shows the church in the West is in multi-generational decline, the opposite is true almost everywhere else. The churches of non-Western cultures have seen extraordinary and sustained growth for decades. Places like Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Insights from churches from these cultures can help renew the worldwide church. They have the power to invest Western and global mission, worship, and discipleship with new vibrancy. Learn more at theglobalchurchproject.com.
Show your support and please order Invisible, available wherever books are sold. For sponsorship inquiries, please email madangpodcast.gmail.com.